perspective, or?
Have you heard of a recognition of Taiwan coming out of Micronesia?
No, but we did hear in March that Nicaragua had derecognized Taiwan.
Honduras.
Thank you.
I think Nicaragua
They're all the
was...
same.
Nicaragua was a couple.
They did it a few years ago.
Yeah.
So Honduras has recently, the most recent one to switch.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting political warfare question. Why has everybody heard about Honduras and nobody's heard about Micronesia?
Because Micronesia didn't actually switch to Taiwan.
But we heard about Honduras threatening to switch. We heard about the whole lead up to it until it happened. And now we're not hearing about because if you don't hear about it, it doesn't create the momentum.
It's because nobody knows
I actually saw a article and it said the outgoing president of Micronesia. The headline was the outgoing president of Micronesia. So then the impression you get is that this guy's just a lame duck and he's saying this, but then it won't actually happen.
So he has it's an interesting legal question. What he's trying to do is take the hit for the successor. So he's in power until about May. He thinks he has the legal ability to do it. And if you think about somebody like Sogavari flipped Solomons from Taiwan to China without Congress or anything. He just did it unilaterally. So the FSM system is a little bit more complicated, but he knows, or I know he thinks he can do it. And he wants to do it to make it a fait accompli for the person who comes next. Now, Taiwan won't do it. I mean, I've been thinking about this a long time. I was in Taiwan recently, talked to a lot of people there about it. And I think Taiwan won't do it unless State Department signs off on it. Mm-hmm. So then what you're doing is, because the other thing they're saying is, oh, maybe they'll switch back or things like that. But if what it is the U.S. saying to the world, and especially to the politicians in Federated States of Micronesia, which is a compact state, so it has a very unique relationship with the U.S., we support this decision to switch to Taiwan. So it's not just about you and Taiwan. It's about you and the U.S. and Taiwan. And ideally, Japan would join that as well. Then you're creating a safety buffer for the new president when he comes in to continue with that position. And in an ideal world, because there are three compact states, if you remember, there's Palau, Marshall Islands, and Federated States of Micronesia. Palau and Marshall Islands already recognize Taiwan. So if you even had an event where you had the two presidents, the president of Marshall Islands, president of Palau, somebody from the U.S., President Tsai, all welcoming Micronesia back into the family of freedom, that's a really strong message. It's a huge political warfare win on a field that we've almost given up on. And last thing, geographically, as you can see by this map,
there won't be a map.
if Marshall Islands, Federated States of Micronesia, and Palau all recognize Taiwan, then you have this zone of freedom that goes from Hawaii through the Central Pacific and up to Taiwan. So from a strategic perspective, from an operational military perspective, it's incredibly important.
Well, so that seems like something the State Department should be all about.
Did you just hear about the State Department recently?
I seem to remember someone saying something not great things about it, like
but
5 or 10 minutes ago.
But also, like, you talk about this like it's really important for countries to recognize Taiwan instead of the PRC. But the United States, the most influential country in the West, has not recognized Taiwan since 1970, I forget, 79, something like that.
Sure.
Like, how can the U.S. say that the Federated States of Micronesia, or even sign off on that, given that the U.S. is such a big fat hypocrite?
So the U.S. doesn't seem to have a problem with that, with
being a big fat hypocrite. No, I agree with you on that, actually.
Yeah. So I think that it could certainly be done. I also think, of course, that the U.S. should just admit the obvious, that there is an independent country that runs its own elections and controls its own borders and whatnot called Taiwan.
But we can't use the C word. Country.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can. Yeah. It's the C in the context of China word that makes me a little bit nervous. But yeah, I wouldn't call it, Republic of China, but I would certainly call it Taiwan. But that said, did I tell you about what happened with Palau and Taiwan and the Our Oceans Conference?
No, I don't believe so.
So a little over a year ago, there was a bit more than a year ago, there was an international conference about oceans in Palau. Palau, remember, recognizes Taiwan. They wanted to invite President Tsai. Taiwan has built a lot of buildings, been a very good partner for Palau. You see the Taiwanese flag all over the place when you go through Koror, for example. And the U.S., according to people in Palau, the U.S. said, you know what? You can't invite Tsai because then Secretary Kerry can't come.
Oh, I remember this now.
Yeah,
Yes.
I do remember that.
And by the way, we want you to cover over all of the Taiwanese flags on the buildings.
And so this is like what you've been talking about this whole podcast, just the U.S.
Not the U.S. as a whole.
Not the U.S. as a whole.
State
yes.
Department.
Currently, we are in the U.S. and we're saying these things, but
No, we're in Quebec, so we have to be
that's
precise
right.
about our neighbor to the south.
but yeah, the U.S. government at least seems to just be making these horrible decisions that,
Or at least the State Department.
at least the State Department.
So there's a level above the State Department, which is the National Security Council. So, which is basically kind of the president goes to that. So if a decision was made that this was strategically important, for example, currently going through these negotiations for the compacts of free association, and that seems to be considered something that's important. And that was decided through the appointment of a presidential ambassador level post Yoon to deal with those negotiations. If you're saying these three countries are that important, then maybe you would prioritize the Taiwan thing, even though State Department has some fluffiness on it. This gets back to the question from the very beginning, which is what does the U.S. really stand for right now, in terms of what it presents to its allies is what it stands for. And the Panuelo letter is, Panuelo, as you said, he's lost the election, so he'll only be president until May something. There's a timeline on this. If this is rejected, they don't recognize Taiwan, no other country is going to offer again. Right? This is the biggest, most dangerous statement an individual leader can make. And the Chinese will go after him. They'll go after him, they'll go after his family, they'll go after anybody who facilitated this offer long after he leaves office, because it's the killing the chicken to scare the monkeys thing. They have to make sure that he's dead and buried and nobody ever wants to replicate it.
Kind of like the terrorists in Afghanistan going door to door and killing people in front of their families. It's almost like there's a similar thing.
That's why these leaders are some of the most courageous, moral people on the planet. Right? If you're talking about who's leading the free world, I would argue David Panuelo is one of the biggest leaders of the free world going at the moment. Daniel Soudani's another one. There are these people who put their lives on the line to defend freedom.